minutes
Former,
late.
as a former military man, I have trauma upon the idea of not doing something on time. Like it will destroy me if I'm like, and they get mad at me, and it's like the YouTube counts down until 1 minute, and then it just says waiting on this person. And it's like, so if I go live on time, they're like, you're late. It's like, no, I'm fucking on time. Okay, like just.
Yeah, no, it's hey everyone, we are live now. I'm Jacob Winograd. I am, of course, host of Biblical Anarchy here at LCI in the green room. Guest tonight is Fabian Liberty, also goes by Scott. Scott, I've actually watched your channel, like not, I won't say I'm a regular like subscriber, but like you're one of those like ANCAP creators who I've known of for a while, and I have watched at least a fair bit of your content, some of the debates you've done. Like I listened to, which was really hard to listen to. I listened to your entire debate with Jay Dyer.
Oh God, that's like the worst one of all.
Well, like it was.
Oh God,
the beginning was bad and the end was bad, but the middle was like you guys actually got to stuff a substance, and it was actually like intellectually stimulating. But
yeah, I just gave up with that debate. It was Jay Dyer. Of all the debates you could have watched, mine. That is, oh God, he's the most bad faith person I've ever encountered in terms of online debate space.
Yeah, he does.
And that's saying a lot because I've met a lot of socialists.
I find it's like I'm a Christian, and like there's stuff that Jay does and says that like I agree with, but I don't like the way he approaches doing debates. Like it is just kind of, and I think there's an element to like that blood sport and very performative, like interrupting and stopping people, where it's like I get it to a point, but anyway, we can get into some of this in the conversation.
Yeah,
I do want
to,
yeah, but I did want to give you a chance here at the opening, since it's your first time on the show, to just go ahead and introduce yourself to my audience and to kind of give your background. My running gag is that, since we're all libertarians and ANCAPs, it's kind of like we're in Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's more like Statists Anonymous. So it's just like, what's your recovering statist story when you became a libertarian?
So I'm Scott from the channel is Fabian Liberty. Yes, that is a nod to Fabian socialism, the Fabian Society. A hedgehog in sheep's clothing, if you will. I am an incrementalist, despite being, I might be the only incrementalist that is a hardcore ANCAP. I don't know any others that are.
It's a rare breed.
So, yeah, well, an ANCAP, a full-blown ANCAP is a rare breed. I'm very much in the school of like Liquid Zulu, in terms of a mixture of ANCAP and objectivist philosophy. And I do debates, I do reactions, things of that nature. A lot of debate panels. I didn't get my. I went a completely different route than most libertarian quote unquote podcasters. I've never been in the libertarian podcasting space. I never really got those opportunities or worked in that area. I did everything starting on Twitch with like debates and trying to be in the trenches against like all of the different variety of statists, trying to go to their home and debate, socialists and, of every variety. And, and sprinkle the seeds of anarcho-capitalism, because it was an area that was, quite frankly, there weren't that many libertarians there at all, despite the fact that libertarians have a bunch of podcasts. I kind of see a lot of the time it's a bit of a circle jerk, no offense, right? But it's libertarians talking to other libertarians about how we can talk to other people instead of talking to those other people. And that's nothing against the libertarian podcast space. It's just I found a niche. That's kind of what I do. So if you want to check me out, Fabian Liberty on YouTube. I eventually got off of Twitch because Twitch was just a dangerous place to build a platform with the ideas that I have. The writing was on the wall. I was going to get banned eventually for something. YouTube's a little bit safer. I'd love to be on Rumble or Kick or something. Well, actually not Kick, but it is what it is. In terms of my story, to just try and keep a very long life story short, I grew up in a very liberal household. I became more radical than my parents. I had a short stint being a communist and a Maoist before, becoming a democratic socialist. And over time, um, life experiences between the court system with some of my family and some just horror stories there, and then growing up, becoming more conservative as you get more grounded in reality in the real world. I became kind of eventually became a left libertarian, um, moving eventually into like minarchist, and then I read Robert Murphy's Chaos Theory, and that was like the final nail in the coffin for me to being a real libertarian, right, as opposed to like a minarchist or something, um, which was was like, oh, even though I didn't agree with this, the theory drove me there. It was like, oh, well, clearly it's possible to get rid of the court system at the state level and have a system that functions. And then, yeah, and then, I had a stint with Christianity. I tried really, really, really hard to be a Christian. Like I was raised Catholic, um, went to church for many, many, many times, baptized in my own communion, all that fun stuff. I got a minor in religious studies in college. I went to Liberty University for grad school. I mean, I tried hard, but the more I searched, the more I was convinced that Christianity just wasn't true, despite despite that soul search, if you will, for meaning. It drove me further away from Christianity over time. That's not, and that's just relevant because of where we're at today. And so, yeah, there's a very long life story short.
Yeah. I mean, other than the Christian part, a lot of what you said, very similar to my experience. I started out, I was raised in a conservative home, but that was sort of like the gateway to me becoming a leftist. I guess like a sort of stereotypical evangelical Christian upbringing combined with public
Hmm.
education. And I just kind of went, all this is nonsense. And I fell in with the left. I was a democratic socialist. I was like a OG, like, Occupy, sort of like Occupy Wall Street, sort of progressive
Yeah, I
and
was there.
Bernie bro.
I,
Yeah. And so,
I,
uh,
how old are
uh,
you?
33.
So I'm 35, right? So I think
Yeah.
I think there's a similar kind of situation where we were teenagers, and then right as we're entering or hitting adulthood, the 2009 financial collapse occurred,
Yeah.
and like the Occupy Wall Street movement. I was there, at the federal building in Richmond and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I didn't discover libertarianism until much later. For me, it was like when Trump was elected and the left sort of just went sort of like, well, instead of caring about economic inequality, we're just going to sort of double down on all this woke stuff and identity politics and, orange man bad. And that sort of pushed me into, I guess, like a political sojourn. And I I didn't do that typical, like, the expression, the difference between a minarchist and an anarchist is 6 months. Well, for me,
Yeah.
I kind of went straight from sort of centrist with maybe some libertarian inklings to ANCAP very rapidly because I was introduced to the idea of anarchy by a friend of mine who, presented me Adam Kokesh's book, uh, which was, called Freedom, I think. And
Hmm.
I discovered libertarianism through Dave Smith, but then I was, like, meeting up with, like, local libertarians and whatnot. They recommended that book to me, which is actually, despite the fact that Kokesh is maybe, like, less popular these days and
Yeah.
maybe made some questionable life choices, that book is actually, like, a good way to introduce anarchy to a more left-leaning person. And so, but then I kind of the same thing as you. I was like, well, this makes sense philosophically, but like, how do you do like courts and law and all this stuff without the state? And so then
Hmm.
that's kind of what pushed me into, yeah, like the Mises Institute and Bob Murphy and Rothbard and Hoppe and all that. And so I just like
Yeah.
read like everything all at once over the course of like like a week or two and
Yeah.
just, rapidly was just like, and then
Yeah,
became
I
a
discovered I discovered left wing anarchism, in as a leftist, right? Like I like read some Kropotkin and things like that, and was like, oh, this is silly nonsense. This doesn't work without a state. Like you need sure, this is the end goal of communism, but like you can't implement this now and etc. And then I didn't, which is kind of funny that to like almost kind of horseshoe theory, like discovering left wing anarchism and then going through libertarianism to discover anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. But I discovered libertarianism through Stefan Molyneux.
Yeah, yeah. Molyneux was one of those guys who was also on my radar back in the day when I was starting to like, because like I think like at that time period it was very like the YouTube like political space was like kind of starting its heyday, right? And you had a
Yeah,
bunch
well,
of like
Gamergate, you know.
yeah, so yeah, there was Molyneux, there was like Stick Steffenhammer, there was uh got a lot of guys who like went by. Of course, a lot of people didn't use their real names back then, so they had all these weird, which I guess still exists to some
Apparently,
point
Styx
today.
just got arrested.
Yeah, I saw something about that. I
I
didn't
don't,
look
and
into
then
it.
people were like, and I don't know any of the lore. I saw like random Discord messages of like him being like, the case is dropped, ha ha ha. And then I was just like, I don't know what's going on. You know, I don't follow him that closely, but just figured I'd mention that since you mentioned his name. Apparently got
Yeah.
arrested today.
Yeah, but Molyneux had some really good, like that one video he did, like the what is it, the story of your enslavement, or that that might be crap, what's his name? Larkin Rose. They both had very similar videos like that in that kind of theme. But Molyneux has that one where it's just like talking about like the evolution of like serfdom into the state and just how like you're born to be
Yeah,
a
I mean,
slave.
you know, the thing that was interesting about Molyneux is, you know, I encountered Molyneux as a leftist, and you know, my initial reaction was like, "Oh, this guy's a racist piece of shit." You know what I mean? Like he's obsessed with talking about IQ because he just wants to prove that black people are inferior. Like this guy's a white supremacist. Like I don't need to listen to him anymore. And then like you know, as I saw Occupy get destroyed by woke culture,
Right.
right? And I saw the libertarians get pushed out. And then I got older and I got a little bit more grounded in reality. You know, I came back to that. And another part of it I owe to my best friend, who's like actually my roommate as well. Like when I was working for the government, I was working on the census as a census field quality control census field supervisor. So I was just driving across the state for hours on end to go look at like one house somewhere out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains to like correct an issue for the census, and like just having conversations with him. And I think he was so like tangentially, you know, he was watching like Legion of Skanks and Dave Smith and Part of the Problem and stuff. But I never was like a big viewer of like Dave Smith, but like maybe if I give the devil his due, you know, Dave Smith helped you know move my friend who then helped moved me, right? Like if I can be as the most charitable thing I can say about Dave Smith.
Well, I mean, I think people know you know, like Dave did a debate with Sam Cedar, and that was like my first, when I was kind of like listening to a bunch of YouTube videos, that was like my first intro to a principled argument for libertarian free market stuff. And that, which I think I had like heard before and maybe like seen some stuff from Peter Schiff, but it was the first time that like the real like, oh, like part of this whole, because I was very much like an economic leftist, and it was the first time that I heard stuff that kind of like clicked in terms of like the Federal Reserve being kind of the root problem behind all that stuff. And then he then came up again later in my radar because he was often on things with like the Mises Institute and pushing their stuff. And so you know, like he's the one who brought up Anatomy of the State, which I read, which, you know, was also kind of in that early phase of reading things and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I don't. Yeah, someone in my chat's like Dave principled. It's funny to associate Dave with principled libertarianism in this day and age. It's kind of funny, but yeah. Anatomy of the State's a good one, right? I think it's a nice intro book. It goes a little hard on judges randomly, you know what I mean? It's like there's that whole tangent where he's just like, and the judicial system. And it's just like, all right, man, like you really hate the judicial system in this 80-page manifesto. Like 40 pages are about how judges are bad. So like it almost feels like it should be rewritten. The name of that book should be rewritten. But it's a good introduction to libertarianism.
Yeah, and I think it, you know, the part in there about democracy and kind of pushing back against the we are the government sort of stuff is it's useful rhetoric to introduce people to. You know, you brought up, we've mentioned him several times now, Dave Smith, and obviously you're
Well,
coming
that's all
from
the
more of
buzz.
the
You know what I
the
mean? Yeah.
Zulu. Yeah, you're coming more from the Zulu camp, and like the elephant in the room being the debates that just happened, which I was the moderator of, and we can talk about some of that maybe a little bit later in the stream. But
Yeah,
one of
sure.
the things that like, because I'm obviously friends with Dave, and I do defend him and think he's still a very principled person and a good libertarian, good person for the movement. But something that I disagree with him on, that I even mentioned in that debate, is his position on immigration. It's something
Mhm.
I've wrestled with, because like even when I was on the left, I was never like I was always wishy-washy. I've always been wishy-washy on the border stuff because I think it's always been
Mhm.
complicated from the time I was more on the left to even when I became a libertarian. And obviously, libertarians have been debating the issue for a long time. And
Mhm.
I was talking to Zulu like post one of our streams, maybe like a month or so ago, and it was after the debate I moderated between him and Dan Sanchez from Fee, and he was talking about, because I gave my argument for why I can't support mass deportations and what's going on
Mhm.
in America right now under the Trump system, and then Zulu was like, "Yeah, that sounds kind of like what Fabian is saying, because he recently changed his mind on immigration and whatnot." So then I
Yeah.
kind of went back and saw the posts you made about that, and I thought that was kind of what I initially thought, that it'd be cool to have you on for a conversation, because, like, I think I come from a side of the movement because of my time, like, not just because I'm like friends with Dave or was brought into the movement kind of by Dave, but also like I was very much involved with the Mises Caucus and the Takeover Libertarian Party, and obviously that's the faction of the party and movement that's known for being more like, at least on the surface, seems like they're more pro-Trump and pro-ICE and pro-deportation and immigration control and all that. And I've always kind of been more the, one of the ones in those circles that have been less gung ho about that stuff, and even more so recently. So, what was your position on borders? I guess, you know, uh, we don't have to go all the
6
way
months
back,
ago
like
or
over
whatever.
the entire, yeah, but like, yeah, 6 months ago, before your position changed, where did you stand on that as a
Yeah,
as an
so
ANCAP?
the first thing I think we should mention is that probably the definitive issue of libertarianism is the discussion of borders. I think it really separates, how you view the state in general. And the reason it's such a big discussion is because the concept of the border is really about the definition of the state itself, right? A truly fully unregulated border is one in which there is no state, really, right? Like the destruction of the border is the destruction of the state, because I view the state kind of like, and the way that we deal with the state, I kind of view it like a game of Jenga, and like you kind of want
Yeah,
to pull out the pieces in the right order so that the whole thing doesn't just collapse. Now,
I
don't get
agree.
me wrong, if I can push the button that collapses the state, that is the preferred action always. But it very well could lead to, like, if we're not philosophically libertarian, there's no guarantee that what comes next is going to be, a libertarian utopic, kind of society, or a thousand Liechtensteins, right? And so I think the discussion of the border really separates whether or not people are genuinely libertarian, or whether or not they hold libertarianism as like a set of values, right? And so if you're ever for, let's say, like if you say sometimes it is okay to violate the NAP, right? You're not a libertarian. You're definitionally just not. Like, you cannot be a libertarian and be for violating the NAP, because at that point libertarianism has no meaningful definition. It's not a set of values, it's a descriptive legal philosophy, and with ethics being a subset of with law being a subset of ethics, you fall into contradiction, and so you're just simply not a libertarian. But there are people like Stefan Kinsella, people like Hoppe, right, who are libertarians that derive a kind of bordertarian stance from the non-aggression principle, because of that idea of like the state being a set like Jenga, right? Not trying to, when you read, Hoppe's comments on the border and his Hoppian invitee system, is like, look, the state exists. Let's try and push the needle towards something that is closer to libertarianism, right? Because goods can travel freely, whether or not they're invited, but people can't. And there are all these other elements of the state that are like problematic when it comes to people that can move their own feet, like welfare, like Civil Rights Act, right? Well, I mean, welfare covers a lot of things, right? So we'll just leave it at that. And so, 6 months ago, I was very much of the position that, look, from the Friedman kind of perspective of you can't have a welfare state and you can't and open borders at the same time. And so it was my opinion that, like, strategically speaking, the best thing to get us towards anarcho-capitalism would be an Hoppian invitee system and not to open up the borders to allow what is, I think, absolutely, and I still think this today, forced integration, right? You have the state giving massive amounts of welfare towards populations that would not be able to survive without that welfare in the United States, creating a new voter class that is designed to ethnically replace white people in this country, designed to be a new voter base for the Democratic Party. They are, designed to utilize the welfare system to create, a permanent victim class that is voting for socialism to higher degrees. And so opening the border can push all of those things in that way. That was kind of my position 6 months ago. But if I wish that it was like, oh, I read a theory book, but I re-examine things, and I re-examine things because of the horror of the Trump administration. I mean, this is like, I mean, it's so callous and so in your face and so disgusting how so many people view immigrants and people and families, that almost all of these people have lost any sense of humanity on the right wing. They have lost the moral high ground completely. They have abandoned morality in any way, shape, or form for the preference of their own whim worship. And so it made me re-examine whether or not that was the appropriate strategy. And I don't think it is, and we can go into that more later.
Yeah, I think that there is a frustration I have, which is perhaps why I can be perceived as wishy-washy, or sometimes people will assume I have the same position as like some of my friends on
Mm-hmm.
this issue. Because I've often said that my reluctance in calling myself an open borders libertarian, when I like Zulu and others bite that bullet. I don't
I
like
don't,
it because I think
I don't like
and I,
that term. I
right.
don't. I,
So
I will not identify as an open borders libertarian.
because I think the way you
Still private borders or closed.
yeah, right. And I think
Private.
like to say open borders kind of implies that like the libertarian position is still like the describing what the state should or shouldn't do, as if it like, and we would agree that even if like I think this is easy to demonstrate in the current paradigm, but even in like a constitutionalist minarchist paradigm, just the fact that the border is so fundamental to the existence of a state, that intrusion is still a distortion. Enforcing that legal monopoly within a border is still going to what you have with an open border state in terms of the movement of people is still not movement based upon just pure free market forces. And
Yeah.
so so I think we would agree on that. Um, in the status quo we live in now, I feel like too many open borders libertarians. Now, I won't hold Zulu to this because I think he does bite this bullet, whereas others don't. Will do this sort of like Cato Institute kind of reason spin of open borders, where they just completely sell it as an unmitigated good. Like,
Oh yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
It's a horror show.
Right, yeah, and so I have always kind of been the type to be like, "Listen, I'm not here to tell you that when you see open borders being used by the state to import millions of people, or being used to sort of, in combination with the war on drugs and with welfare and all this stuff, I'm not here to tell you that those problems aren't real. I think they're very real problems. I think this is sort
Mm-hmm.
of, uh I think theory matters here, of course, but I also think it's just sort of, for me, kind of a calculation of trade-offs in and I think that Jenga analogy
Theory
is
always
useful here.
matters, I think.
I think theory always matters. I think it's a combination also though of this sort of Jenga analysis problem where I'm kind of like, well, I understand that it's kind of evaluating the trade-offs. It's like, well, the trade-offs of allowing the open borders or not calling for closed borders right now is sort of the stuff we see, or we saw like in the Biden administration. But if I compare that to what it would take to do something like closing the U.S. borders and doing mass
Mhm.
deportations, it's like, well, that's calling for an even larger expansion of state power. That's calling to literally turn America into a police state, to completely
Right.
do away with even the pretense of things like due process and following the Constitution. So it's just like, I think that I understand that. Listen, like I would even be okay. Like, if I think this is kind of actually hard to imagine happening. But if you wanted to say, listen, I don't want open borders, I don't want closed borders, can we compromise? It's like, okay, like a Hoppian invitee system is like something in the spirit of compromise in a libertarian direction that I'd probably be okay with, but maybe some open borders purists would still not be okay with. And I'd kind of
I
understand
used
that.
to
But
yeah, I used to think that that was the correct answer. There's a couple of things here. I did a stream with Nicola on this arrow of regression theory that he's come up with, and I think, if he cleans up the presentation, it might be a good stream for you as well. To like, to do libertarian analysis of policy and understand, what direction the state is moving in. And so the basic concept of the arrow of regression is this motivated by a belief that the state can solve problems? If you believe the state can solve problems, you're already of a socialist mindset, no matter what the problem is. If you think, well, the state can solve some problems, we can use money and then we can engage in whatever the problem is, and the state can correct that problem. And the fact of the matter is that the state can never solve problems. It's an impossibility. It's just logically impossible. And
do
the
you mean in a
reason it's
meta
logic,
sense?
I mean, I mean literally, when the state targets an issue and then you use state funds towards that issue, it always leads towards some trade-off that is more negative than positive every single time. The
So
reason
do you
being, like,
mean,
well,
well,
I'll give
I
you an
don't,
example. I'll give
give
you
me
a
an example.
hypothetical, right? So let's say, um, one of the things I'm passionate about is lead pipes in inner cities, especially. There's no healthy amount of lead, period. And the poorer the area, especially in urban areas, we get more lead in the water. And what lead does is it lowers IQ and increases developmental disorders and increases the likelihood of individuals to engage in high risk behavior. So there's a direct correlation between communities that have more lead water in their drinking water and, higher crime and lower IQ and less economic activity. So let's say the state says, well, we're going to fix this problem. We're going to spend, $500 billion to retrofit all of these pipes and, get rid of all of the lead drinking water in these inner cities. Well, that's a problem. And in theory, the state solves that problem. But the issue is that anytime the state takes, $500 billion from us, they're taking $500 billion out of the US economy. They're moving it from its most valued ends towards lesser value ends. Otherwise, the state is unnecessary, right? Like, it's completely unnecessary. The market would have fixed whatever problems exist out in the world. But the state intervened and took away money, took $500 billion out of the economy and put it towards this. And so the problem becomes that we never have a comparison between an alternate timeline where the state didn't correct this quote unquote problem. We don't have an alternate timeline where $500 billion wasn't stolen from the US economy. And so we can't compare how many people died from fentanyl overdoses because they lost their job and they went into a depression and started doing heroin because the economy is weaker and there were less jobs available. How many businesses had to scale back or, were destroyed because they didn't have economies of scale because the taxes went up. Or maybe the taxes didn't go up and the state just went money printer go burr and we have higher inflation. How many people, went to the grocery store and didn't have it? Like there's all of these other factors. And so you can look at it and say, oh, well, look, the state solved this problem. But in reality, what the state did is it stole money from the economy, creating a bunch of problems that aren't necessarily immediately obvious or identifiable to target it towards this issue. And then they claim victory over the issue by solving the issue. But the state doesn't actually solve problems. It's a market intervention that is against the values of the people at all times.
Would it be more accurate to say that it doesn't solve problems without creating other problems? I mean, I feel like, because, and I don't mean to be too like literal or like pedantic here, but like, because I was trying to think even like just on a very micro scale, like I don't think that we should, obviously we're ANCAPs. I don't think we should use taxpayer money to build roads, but there's obviously times where like there's a broken road and the state comes and fixes the broken road. Or like, if you think about like the judicial system, which, don't get me wrong, the American judicial system is horrible, but it's not like they never it's not like they literally never prosecute an actual murderer or theft case correctly.
The point of understanding that the state doesn't solve problems doesn't mean that the state can't see something that, that a central planner can see that there is some issue somewhere, and then they can direct funds towards that issue. The problem is that in the process of quote unquote solving that problem, they've created new problems.
Right.
And they have done so, and in every turn, in every way, the state will always be inferior than the market solutions that would be available.
This is just the problem of economic calculation. Like, they don't have all the variables. They're not allocating.
They can't solve the ECP, right? So when, that's really important though, because this can apply to immigration. You have this belief that the state can solve problems. You need to apply the economic calculation problem to things like immigration as well, and recognize that when the state says, there is this problem, which is, let's say a whole bunch of Somalians in Minnesota, right, that are like defrauding the US government, there is either a belief, okay, government intervention in the market caused this, therefore we need to reduce or release government intervention in the market. That's the libertarian solution. And the anti-libertarian is the closed border. If you say, the way to solve this problem is to have the government intervene, and the government intervene further in the market, then what you are saying is, I am an enemy of libertarianism. Every closed border person that says the government can solve this problem and that is actively fighting against the concept of the government not being involved in things, and is instead the government creates a problem, and now they're endorsing the government's solution to the problem created by the government.
So I agree with everything there. Couldn't you say though that again, part of me doesn't always like to bring up the Hoppian example. This is a bit of a tangent, because I think even though I think it would be kind of better than the status quo, it's also like, I think it's actually harder to implement that on like some kind of grand scale than people might want to admit. But if we're just sort of examining it just in pure theory here, I think the Hoppian system is more comparable to a incrementalist approach to immigration than to say it is a grounded in a belief in, I think the state can solve problems. It's more like, I think the state can't solve problems. What we have now is total, like, what we have now is so bad. And this is kind of like, it's sort of like going from the IRS and all the taxes we have right now to like abolishing all that and replacing it with like some kind of flat tax or something. And you'd still be like, well,
difference.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a fundamental difference. And so when Hoppe puts forward his invitee system, and you read about it, right? He is saying that there are all of these elements of government destruction and government control in the market, and that this is a pragmatic, for lack of a better word,
gosh,
compromise.
The word is very loaded.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I'm just teasing. I had to, right? But he is deriving this from the non-aggression principle. He is deriving saying, we need private borders. That is what we need to get to. And this, I believe, reduces that, and it's a realistic thing that we can get done today. And so if the United States, if the Republican Party somehow became wildly more libertarian in perspective or values and stated immigration and welfare are both problems created by the state. And so, we don't think we can pass through Congress right now open borders. And so we're going to put forward this hopping invitee system, to get us closer towards anarchism. Then that is motivated by an understanding that the state has caused these problems and that this is the best victory we can get in our current governmental structure. So we're going to vote for that system. That is fundamentally different than somebody like Dave Smith saying, well, what about the will of the people? And like preaching collectivism and anti-libertarianism, right? Like that those are two wildly different things. If you're a bordertarian, that believes in a hopping invitee system because you recognize that the state is this destructive element and that welfare is destructive and our current immigration system is destructive of human, civil liberties or rights, et cetera. And so you're putting forward this policy prescription as a means of getting us closer to anarchism and destroying the state, then like I can support you in that. But if you're doing it understanding that like, oh, this immigration issue is a problem that the state and the government can solve. We can solve all of these problems of like too much welfare being used and, ethnic communities being replaced and, them bringing in the voter class for the Democratic Party, and the means by which we do this is cracking down on immigration. Then what you're doing is you're setting forward a philosophy, which is the driver of all politics, right? That the state can target and solve problems. And every time you say, look, I fixed the lead water pipes, this will be used as further justification for more state intervention. And it inevitably leads to a growing socialist government as opposed to a libertarian government. It actually pushes us towards that socialism.
I would pretty much agree with all of that. I think to sort of steelman where Dave and others are coming from, which again, I'm sympathetic to it to the degree that I understand the concern, and it can. I think
me too. By the way, I totally understand the concern.
And I think the actual problem here is that sometimes we as libertarians have to, if we're talking about biting bullets, like one of the bullets we have to bite or bitter pills we have to swallow is that sometimes the state can create these no-win situations. And I feel like what part of what Dave's argument is that like the consequences of mass immigration, especially like state sort of accelerated mass immigration, is so bad that it's literally like a lesser of two evils argument. It's like we have to use this to kind of ward off this horrible outcome. And now I think Dave then tries to, like in his debates with Alex at Soho and others, tries to then relate this to libertarianism by way of like saying that like, well, if the people did not consent to this mass influx of people because it's not happening through market transactions, then we libertarians can say this is not a free market outcome and we can oppose it. And I think, well, that part's kind of right. But then and I think this was Alex Nirwasta's strongest point in that debate, even though I think Alex didn't do I don't think Alex did a very good job in that debate for reasons we can talk about. But
I think they both did a really bad job.
I think one of the things Alex said, which is true, is that you can't like disconnect the outcome you want of like mass deportations and closed borders from the means that is required to make that happen. And I think that is where I depart from Dave. Is because he's kind of like, he builds this case and it's like, I'm with you. But then when we get to the point, and I think he has said, like when I've challenged him on it, he goes, hey, listen, maybe I'm wrong and maybe you're right. But it's just like, I feel like once we get to this point of like, it's to me more of the, it's the stacking state interventions on state interventions. It's like, I get it. This seems like a real problem, and I don't think we should deny the problem. But I think what you're going to end up happening is the state's actually going to fail, because there's something about it that's absurd on its face. It's like you believe, and I think they're right to believe, that the state has a vested interest in this sort of like coalescence of different interests, a conspiracy of interest, if you will,
Mhm.
in opening the borders and kind of weaponizing that to their own ends. But then you're kind of going in and saying, can you please, you people who are doing this, stop that and reverse course and do so in a way that doesn't give yourself more power. I'm just like, I just think that's kind of like,
Well,
you get what I mean?
let
Like there's
me
something,
let me
I think there's something absurd about that. Like asking the people who are doing the thing you don't like to stop doing the thing you don't like and reverse it.
Yeah, I agree that like you present a let's talk about the current example. I think this like elucidates the real problem. Let's talk about what all the conservatives are talking about, which is Somalians in Minnesota, right? Now, what we know is, two Democrats voted against their party. What was it, maybe like a year ago? And then some guy who was paid by USAID in Africa fucking all of a sudden decides to assassinate two politicians and then that just gets swept under the rug. This guy that was known on the FBI's radar. Very suspicious to me. But like, let's set the conspiracy theories aside, right? And we know that we're now finding out that it's roughly $8 billion, right? Which is like a good chunk of what we sent to Israel. We've sent to fucking fraudulent Somali welfare system. And we have this population that is very low IQ and very, very high rates of inbreeding. Right? That's just a reality. I know people will be like, that's racist. It's just true, right? Somalians are 99% ethnically homogenous. They're 99% Muslims, which is, antithetical to libertarianism. But where is the conversation at with every conservative? It's about race. It's about culture. It's about why Somalians are bad. It's about, oh my God, I can't think of her name. One of the Somalian from Minnesota that is their representative. Regardless, Elon Omar. Sorry, it's about Elon Omar, right? None of it is about the actual problem, and that is the reason why closed borders is such a problem. Is that closed borders and immigration conversations are a means of covering up the actual problem. The actual problem is that we have a welfare system that they could abuse for $8 billion. That's the actual issue. It's not that there isn't the occasional Somalian that would be successful in America, or that even it's the fact that we have immigration and deportation as this on the table solution for problems created by people, created by the state, is the problem in and of itself. If we could just like push a magic button where all of the conservatives in America no longer thought of mass deportations of innocent people. And I mean innocent from a natural law perspective, not from a legal positive position, right? Where they couldn't get rid of illegal immigrants or legal immigrants unless they had actually committed a crime, right? If that was no longer in a thought in their head, every single one of those conservatives would be saying, what the fuck is up with this welfare system? Why is all of my money being stolen to support a population that is defrauding the US government? And why is it that the Democrats allowed that system to defraud everybody else and steal money out of my business, out of my children's mouth, so that we can forcibly import this voter class? The problem is that when you put immigration on the table as a potential solution, it takes away all conversation of what is the actual problem. And the actual problem is that somewhere between like 30 to 50% of all of the wealth that every single American makes is going towards welfare. Like 74% of the US federal budget is payments on the debt and entitlement spending, right? Only 20, that means 26% of the budget is infrastructure, military, all of the things that we vote on. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, TANF, welfare, corporate welfare towards like, payouts and subsidies, all of those things that are market interventions is like 74% of the US budget. And when you take all of our taxes plus inflation, property taxes, sales taxes, etc., somewhere between like 50 to 70% of all of your money is stolen. Literally, it's not like it's not just the income tax, right? Like you look at Social Security and you go, okay, I make $20 an hour, what is it? 7.1% of my paycheck is taken away. Well, you forget that your business has to pay payroll taxes, so they pay 7.1. So 15% of your payroll right off the bat is stolen to support Somalian immigrants in Minnesota, right? Like that's the actual fucking problem, and that's why we have third worlders with fucked up ideologies thriving in this country, is because we have a government system that steals a majority of all of our wealth to funnel to these immigrants. If we got rid of all of that welfare, we wouldn't, why the fuck, you wouldn't give a fuck about immigrants, because the immigrants would have to survive on their own 2 feet and within their own community and support systems, and they'd be economically productive members of society. Well, but the immigration issue covers up the actual issue.
And all of these things also, of course, increase the antisocial behavior and harmful ideologies that are just
festering. Sorry, could you say
that
again? I was coughing.
All of these things you're pointing to also foster and accelerate the antisocial behavior and growth of harmful ideologies just within the native-born population.
Yeah,
and increase.
Why do you think Nick Fuentes is getting popular?
Right. Yeah, it increases the even just the tensions between like blacks and whites in inner cities and stuff like that, and the rise of identity politics and all that, and it's just so I think all that is fairly spot on. I think that another part of this is sort of like going back to like the criminal justice side of things, because I think some people go, well, now that they're here and you're saying we can't deport them, so what, are we just supposed to be less safe and just sort of like put up with that? And I'm like, well, part of the issue is that you're still kind of going to your arguments here. You have created this expectation that it's the government's job to keep you safe. And that sort of faulty premise, which I understand is sort of like we're raised with that. And that is sort of one of our jobs as libertarian ANCAPs, is to kind of try to disavow people of that mindset, is to say, actually, like communities and families and churches and whatnot, like they should be being more proactive to take charge of their own safety and responsibility, which should make you more angry when state and federal regulations make it harder for you to arm yourself, harder for you to form private militias and private security forces. Make it, you could also point out civil rights legislation, which means that like business owners and whatnot feel like they can't even like discriminate against either hiring or allowing certain people in their businesses because they'll be called out as being racist and for it'd be illegal and stuff. So
what I mean? Like you can't discriminate on someone based upon their nationality of origin.
Right. So like you can't like a business owner who is in like Minnesota right now can't just be like, which I'm not saying this is the right way to handle it, but like just for ease of argument, they would get in trouble if they said we're not serving any Muslims, right? Like if you come in and you're in obvious Muslim attire, we won't serve you, right? And they would get in trouble for that. So
don't be scared. Just say it. Muslims suck. Fuck Islam. I don't want them in my business. Don't be afraid to be called a racist, Jacob.
I don't want to get into I'm obviously a Christian, so I'm not a Muslim, so I can criticize Islam. So one of these things that is kind of difficult though, which is a bit of a tangent, is I'm sometimes reluctant to feed into the anti-Islam stuff, only because I have an allergy to how much that was weaponized to sell American imperialism and endless wars in the Middle East. So I want to find ways to talk about that stuff that's nuanced, because if you understand the history of that region, like it is kind of true that as much as Islam and radical Islam are, very ideologically evil and anti-libertarian, anti-Christian, the British and American governments and military actions going back over a century have only served to foster Islamicism and radicalism in that region from kind of a macro zoomed out point of view. Like we've always funded the terrorists and funded the radicals to the detriment of the secular and reformers in that world. So it's kind of like, now that doesn't mean, go ahead.
I think we ought to treat the entire Middle East like the Shadowlands in the Lion King. That's how I like fuck that entire region. Right? Like fuck the Jews, fuck Israel, fuck the Muslims, fuck Palestine, fuck the Middle East. Like just fuck that entire region. Okay, that region has like can't stop bombing each other, and every time we get involved, we make everything there worse. I'm done. The problem is that I feel like for some reason libertarians just do not talk about this enough. Is that the entire US economy is based upon the petrodollar. The whole reason we're there is not because we want to steal oil, right? We fight wars for oil, but people think that means that we're trying to gain oil as a resource. We don't give a fuck about gaining oil as a resource. We give a fuck about the fact that Nixon, after he got off the gold standard, backed the US dollar by the petrodollar so that we can export inflation to the rest of the world. And, all of the conflicts that are there, almost all of them, stem from trying to make sure that OPEC Plus is the dominant, force for selling, crude oil, and that's what's backing the USD, right? Like if so long as a majority of the oil in the world is traded in the US dollar, then if we have inflation, we can export inflation to all these other countries, so we can have a bunch of inflation and it doesn't actually affect us. But yeah, we ought to treat that place like the Shadowlands, right? Just like, like all of this is our land. That area over there is where the hyenas are. We don't fuck with that area. I have complete fatigue for that area. But as far as Islam is concerned, yeah, I mean, I kind of see your point that like it plays into the hands of, the US empire to, make Islam an enemy, culturally speaking. But also, if you're a libertarian, Islam is anathema to your ideology, and like being nice to Muslims, for the sake of the U.S. not getting involved in some third world shithole and funding terrorist activities there to continuously fuck up that region, is like, I understand that from a pragmatic position, but from a philosophical position, it's a problem because we have increased Muslim migration. We have like Muslims trying to build cities that are their own and things like that. And Islam is directly opposed to libertarianism. There can be no Muslim libertarian society that works.
Well, I think there can be people who call themselves Muslims, but who probably are like, not following the Quran or Islam as
cafeteria religion, culturally Muslim, sure.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that like, and I think you would agree that like, there's at least, again, everything's multicausal, right? So like, I don't want to, sometimes it's annoying. Like I'll say, this is leading to this. And they'll be like, well, there's other factors too. It's like, yeah, no, I know, like everything's multicausal, but I think a primary
hashtag not all women.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But like a major driver of this immigration in the first place is the empire, is that like we go and destabilize these regions. And it's not even just the past 20 years of action there since 9/11. We've been muddling in the region, both us and Britain. So like the West, broadly speaking, since the even before, and then especially ramping up, around World War I. So it's kind of like, it's like the neocon talking point of like, we have to fight them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here. It's like, they got that backwards. Like you fought them over there, so now they're coming over here. Like if it weren't for that, I don't
know. I like it's hard to know to what degree Western intervention has caused, hatred of the West, and to what degree is it just Islam? Like Islam is a violent religion that is based on conquest.
But they aren't born Muslim, and they aren't all born radical Muslims, right? Like, are you familiar with the King Crane Commission that was done after World War I?
I'm not familiar with it enough to be able to repeat it or anything now.
I mean, it was basically the sort of like, so like the League of Nations, and like the Arabs were lied to by the British and like told that like, if you fight for us, then like you'll get like all these different like regions that were formerly the Ottoman Empire. It's like you'll be able to have your own
Yeah, there's like
sovereignty.
3
Yeah.
British mandates, and they all overlap. Yeah.
Right. And so then they're like, oh, actually that's a lie. You're gonna have like a a mandate. And then when they were basically polled as part of this survey, like what League of Nations or Western nation would you want to be like in charge of your mandate? They all overwhelmingly said they would prefer America to to British and other European countries, because back then we weren't seen as an empire. We were seen as like this republic, a country that values liberty, that we mostly stayed to ourselves and didn't intervene. Which, to be fair, like we were still kind of doing, like we were intervening on our side of the world. We were, going to war with Mexico and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, from their point of view, they were like, well, they're not like the British who are coming over here and occupying us. And then there's just, again, correlation's not causation. And I'm not saying it's just this one factor, but there is like when correlation is almost 1-to-1, and there's like as America intervenes more and more, then you start to see a rise in terrorist attacks and also a rise in fundamentalist Islam in the region rising, because it used to be that there were many more who were like, yeah, nominally Islam or nominally Muslim, but they weren't like being raised in like Islamist death cult ideologies that teach them to strap bombs to their chest, throughout the entirety of like the last 100 years of Islam. So, yeah, I don't know.
I don't deny that Western interventionism causes problems for the West. I'm not making that claim either, right? Like I'm similarly not doing a univariate analysis, right? But the history of that region has always been one of conquest and death and war, predominantly backed by the philosophy of Islam. And so it's like, yeah, maybe if we hadn't intervened, they would have dropped the philosophy that, gives them carte blanche to invade and destroy and expand. But like ever since Islam has been a thing, it has been, it has been a driving force for the philosophy of that region. It has been a region that is focused on conquest, right? Like they took over Spain, and for 400 years they were forcibly, converting people. 2/3 of all castles built in Europe were not built because of medieval, wars against other European countries. They were built to, or against the Vikings, right? They were built to protect from Muslim slave traders in the Ottoman Empire and, things of that nature. They held the largest slave trading empire to ever exist in human history. There's still slavery in that region because of Islam. The fall of Constantinople, like over and over and over again, we see aggression from Muslims. Now, if you want to say that maybe that philosophy would have modernized, maybe we would have more of a more culturally Muslim as opposed to fundamentalist Muslims without Western intervention. Yeah, I agree. Like, I definitely agree that like bombing people doesn't create friends.
Right.
That's
obviously. That's kind of my entire point. Not only that, but like
I think you just have to recognize that both of these are powerful driving forces. That Islam, that you have to recognize that Islam as a religion, supports conquest, supports the jizya, right? Like subjugating people that are not Arabs and that are not Muslims, and giving them taxes based upon their race and whether or not they're people of the book. Supports lying as a fund, the taqiyya, to protect Islam or to protect the empire. You can lie, and so like these things are just fundamentally against the concept of logos
like,
and
I
truth
hear you,
and
but like
libertarianism.
but like, and again, this is tough because it's like I don't want to sit here and be the Muslim apologist, but like there are Muslims who would say, well, actually, the Muslims who are saying the things that you're saying, Scott, like, well, they're misinterpreting the passages, right? Now, I know then the atheists and secularists can go, well, this is just the entire problem with religion. But my point just being that, like, I guess maybe because I am a Christian, I have a little bit more sympathy to go because like, listen, it's not like, and I think you probably agree. I think two things are true at the same time with what I'm about to say here, that I think if you compare Christendom to Islam, I think there's less I think you can make a case there's less blood on the hand of Christendom than Islam, but it's not like Christian kingdoms, or at least nominally Christian kingdoms throughout history, haven't also waged war and done conquest and, engaged in a lot of bloody, evil things at
Yeah,
times. And then,
there's very limited support for that in Christian faith, though, right? Like,
well, so
there is
so
some nominal support for the state in like letters to Romans and things like that. And then obviously in the Old Testament, there is like, God commanding the Jews, wipe out people that are in their promised land and things
the,
like that. But for the most part, Christianity does not explicitly state that like the world belongs to Christendom and that it is like a
no,
commandment
but
from
there's
God to expand the caliphate. You know what I mean?
I
Like there's a
I
difference.
agree. No, I agree. There's a difference there. Although, to be fair, there is a major sect of Christianity that only was born in the last 100 some years that says that, well, maybe we're not supposed to do that, but we're supposed to support the Jewish people no matter what, as they do that. But
Right. Yeah.
so that's definitely a problem there. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too. I think we're not too far apart on that. So I don't want to get too much more bogged down on that. I think I mean, certainly, uh, there are radical Muslims, and I think we would agree, to kind of wrap up this sort of line of conversation, that like we can be alarmed by Islam, we can be alarmed by
Mhm.
millions of Muslims and people from other cultures moving here. We should keep in mind that like there are externalities that are driving this, including state policies of welfare and militarism. And yet, closing the border doesn't solve any of that. It just sort of like adds like more state aggression and central planning into the mix of state aggression and central planning. Now, I understand that some people then are going to go, well, then what are you advocating we do? And it's like, well, this is why we need to just like, which was kind of the whole reason I joined the Mises Caucus in the first place, is like we
Mhm.
need to push this the idea of decentralization very hard. We need to tell people that stop looking to Washington D.C. to keep you safe, and you need to get proactive in your community, in your township, in your
Yeah.
churches, and your
Well,
neighborhoods,
that's
and start fighting for your right to keep yourself and keep your family safe. Like
I will say this. I will say this because you bring up an interesting point, right? In terms of process and kind of that Jenga situation that I was talking about. And one of the things that I think libertarians really, really, really need to focus on is that if you have this, the state has kind of like two mechanisms, right? It has regulation of the private sector, and then it has replacing the private sector with state entities. And one of the things that I think is really important that is that the you need to push first and foremost for deregulation of private solutions to problems. Because I think what many libertarians don't realize is that if you get rid of the state mechanism where they're engaged in, market manipulation of some kind, but you don't first get rid of the deregulation of the market to be able to respond, then what you're really voting for is anarcho tyranny, right? Like, for example, the FDA, like, let's get rid of the FDA. We should absolutely get rid of the FDA. But like, it's probably really fucking important, first and foremost, to get rid of the regulations that prevent competitors to the FDA existing in the market, right?
yeah,
Like, we need to make it to where there are private agencies that can rate drugs as safe or not safe, that can, do, that can engage in insurance practices, as part of insurance companies to rate facilities and things like that. Then when you get rid of the FDA, the market can respond. But if you get rid of the thing that the government is doing without getting rid of the like we were talking about decentralization, if it's not legal for a private security firm to arrest people and to turn them over to, sheriff's county to go to jail, and then you get rid of the local police department, well, then you've just created tyranny. You haven't created liberty, right?
now
So
yeah
I think that's an important thing that you just kind of brought up. I'm like, yes, that focus on
yeah
that.
now to kind of again give a little bit of uh charity to the other side here. Like, I think what they're concerned is that we're going to say don't close the border, but then the anarcho-tyranny element is that's just what's going to continue. And then they're kind of like, so what? Because I get it. Like, it is kind of crappy to say the government is not going to exclude the people from the country that you don't want to associate with. And also, you can't exclude people from your neighborhoods or from your businesses or whatnot, the people that you don't want to associate with. And the government's forestalling all these private solutions. It's like, yeah, that that does seem like a really bad outcome. And and that's not what any of us are advocating for. But I could see the argument that, like, if what we're advocating for, like the decentralization and telling the government to stop forestalling the free market from coming in, that, like, yeah, you don't want the anarcho-tyranny. And so I guess that's why I have a soft spot for their positions, because, like, I see it's, this is going to sound perhaps a little bit demeaning or insulting to them, but I don't mean it that way. I think they're operating more based on fear than principle. I think, and I get it, but that doesn't mean that that's the right way to respond.
The thing is like, if we look at where immigration is a serious problem in this country, every single one of those places is because of state intervention. Genuinely. Like where is immigration a serious issue? New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Minnesota. Like in every one of these instances where it's like, or Springfield, Ohio, right? Let's just take those examples. It's like, okay, well, why is immigration a serious issue in Springfield, Ohio? Oh, because the state paid for 30,000 people to be bussed into this place with our tax money, destroying the culture in that area with partnerships with corporations, right? And that's like a pseudo-fascistic means of importation of labor there. It's not because there were open borders and then 30,000 Haitians decided to move into this small town. The reason there's this giant disruption in Springfield, Ohio is because they were bussed there. And it was done so for the corporations there, and it caused all these problems. You look at Chicago with like Tren de Agua taking over apartment complexes. And it's like, well, why is that a problem? Well, those communities exist because of a massive welfare state in Chicago that is supporting and propping up these people, and then Tren de Agua moves into these bad conditions. Same thing in California, the same thing in New York. What we see over and over and over again, that all of these places where immigration is like causing massive amounts of problems is because of the welfare state. And the entire conversation has gone away from the welfare state as the creator of this problem, and has instead gone towards a combination of the welfare state and loose immigration law. And if we just enact further immigration, we can deport these people and we can correct this problem. And it's to such a degree that it has destroyed the humanity of those on the right. That they're retweeting the White House account celebrating fucking Crocodile Island as like families, and as like Consuela, that's been here for 10 years, is like sent back to a war-torn country, which, by the way, talking about U.S. intervention is like half the reason that those countries are fucked to begin with.
Well,
right? And it's like,
it's like we bombed your home, we funded the terrorists who took over it, and then you fled to our country, and then we kicked you out of there too. It's just like, right.
It's like the government caused a problem in South America, then the government causes a problem with immigration via welfare systems, then the government buses these people in to be a permanent voter class for socialism, and then the right is like, well, just send them back. That'll fix the problem. So it's like, no, you've just added another government intervention that's causing more problems.
There's something on the surface which, like, I can understand the mistake they make, because it almost seems like maybe this is like where intuition can lead you astray. They think, well, man, we've had the welfare state for so long. It's going to be really hard to tear all that down and do all the things that you and I are talking about doing that are the real solutions. But these people just came here. So wouldn't it be easier to just get all the people who came here and send them back? And I'm like, yeah, but like, that's kind of like operating on the premise that like you have the perfect knowledge of, here are the people who just came here, and kind of ignoring again, what does it take to gather them all and send them back? Like, it's actually like, I think what's hard for right wingers, including the right wing libertarians, who I understand. Like, again, I think we're being very charitable to their position, but I think maybe the error in their calculus is they think it'll be easier and less detrimental to liberty to deport all these people and close the borders than it would be to close, like, end or at least drastically cut the welfare state and the warfare state. And I'm like, listen, they're both hard, but I
I
kind of
think
think it's
it's
actually going to be easier to uh put, like, if we were all putting our energy into eliminating the welfare and warfare state, we could probably get a lot more accomplished there. Whereas all you're going to accomplish in this other direction, if you try to deport them all, is you won't deport them all, but you will have created a giant police state. And you will have even further destroyed the,
I think
again,
you're being too
semblance of.
charitable. I think
Okay.
you're being charitable to the bordertarian position. But we have to recognize these are two separate people. As much as I dislike Dave Smith and like bordertarians that are arguing, not from the non-aggression principle, but like from a paleocon strategy, I think I do have to give like some level of acknowledgement that Dave Smith is not your typical Republican. I
Oh, no,
think
I
what
was
you
talking more
described.
about the right wing, like the liberty. Yeah, I guess what I'm saying applies
Well,
more to
I
like
just say these are
Dave
two.
Smith.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
right. It's like Dave Smith is probably in that camp, right? He's probably in the camp of like, man, I'd love to get rid of the welfare state, but I don't see that as an achievable thing right now. And like my country's burning. Let me grab this new government band-aid, for now to like fix this problem because it's an easier solution than getting rid of the welfare state. But your typical Republican loves the welfare state. They love it. Like Donald Trump is the most socialist president of my lifetime, without a doubt. He is, like he ran on tariffs. He ran on government intervention. He's, nationalized 10% of Intel and a few other steel companies that he, merged and gave the United States government a seat on their board. Like he's nationalizing industry. He's giving out massive farm subsidies to fix the problems created by the tariffs that he put in place, right? Like they don't want to get rid of the welfare state. They just don't want the welfare state to go towards people that they view as
Oh,
not
I
them.
agree. Oh, I agree.
Eh,
This is why Nick Fuentes is so popular, because he's basically just a Bernie Sanders but
Nazi.
for white people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's like a third position. You know what I mean? Like, but yeah, it's like so. I think the problem is that if you get rid of the power of the welfare, I'm sorry, of immigration, then it forces a conversation on the welfare. And if you keep immigration on the table, then it allows all of the conservatives to use that as opposed to actually engaging in the welfare.
I
And
hear
so
you.
all it does is
Yeah.
kick the can. All it does is it's a new government thing that is going to create a police state, like you stated, right? But doesn't
Right.
actually fix any problems.
Now, like, so this is interesting. This will cross into some of the stuff Zulu and Dave debated on, because like
Hmm.
when Dave was defending the border position years ago, he came up with this sort of challenge to be like, well, would you say that a public school can't exclude, drug addicts and pedophiles and things like that from the premises? Because like, they we agree that like public schools should be privatized and it's not like legitimately homesteaded and acquired property
Hmm.
and association. So like, should you bite that bullet? And where I land on that, and I said this in the debate, was like, well, Dave, like, I think when you're talking about the public school, you're just talking about this one school keeping, like, it's already kidnapped the kids, and then you're just kind of saying, can you not also aggress against the kids you've already aggressed against a second time by not keeping them safe while you're holding them hostage? But like, that is a much smaller ask, on this, like, these individual micro examples, than to scale that up to the entire nation. Because like, I get there's a similar
Hmm.
argument in saying that like, um, well, we have to, like, we can't privatize all this stuff right away, and so in the meantime, are we just supposed to let all this bad stuff happen? But I do think that like, I think there's like a reasonable, and maybe you would disagree, and I think, I mean, we could talk about that, but
Hmm.
at the very least, like, that's a reasonable concern. But I just think that like going from the micro of a public school to the entirety of the continental United States is just it becomes a much different ask.
I mean, I think the state should abolish public schooling, right?
Right.
And if you're an ANCAP, believe that too. And so,
But like, I
should the
guess they could
state,
ask.
as it's kidnapped children in a building, let a shit covered drug addict into the girls' locker room? The answer is no, right?
Right.
Like I think, and it's because they've kidnapped those children, and the children, I think children too leads into a different domain because you're dealing with people that lack consent and you know what I mean, they lack the same capacity to like pack up and move. But yeah, so long as the children are kidnapped in a building, the state has taken over temporary guardianship of that property. And it becomes incumbent on the state to do its duty to protect those children that it's kidnapped from harm. This is different than the border situation, because if you try and think of the entire U.S. as like public property, well, the analogy immediately breaks down because the U.S. is full of public and private property, right? So like the reductio doesn't quite work in a public school because the public school is assuming that you have only public property and that you have a group of people with an inability to consent and who are kidnapped. It's very different than when you expand it, when you like the reductio just kind of doesn't work.
Yeah, it's
And
not
like
one to one. I mean,
it's not a one-to-one.
you could try to say the federal government has kidnapped us all, but like, and there's
It
maybe
doesn't work,
something.
right?
Yeah, like
Right, like you have private property and you have adults
yeah,
mixed in with this limited public property. Now, if you're talking specifically about public property and the state's like immigration policy, well, it's like there's nothing, if you have public property and you have kidnapped children housed in that public property, then it's incumbent upon the state to violate as little rights as possible. And letting
right.
in drug-addled maniacs into the girls' locker room is like a very different thing than letting a random person, whomever they are, let's even say it's a drug-addled maniac, across a border where they can go to private property, they can go to other places. Like the reductio just doesn't work. It's like a lot of reductios. The problem with the reductio ad absurdum is that it requires the principal elements to be maintained. And very often what people use, they'll say, as a libertarian, I'm willing to bite any bullet. But the problem is that when people do, a lot of times these reductios are not maintaining the principal elements. And so like that's kind of the thing that like upset me a little bit with that debate with Dave Smith and stuff like that, right? Like this steal a penny to save the world kind of analogy is like the classic, are you a libertarian or are you not a libertarian? Right? Because, if you believe that you can violate the non-aggression principle, then definitionally you've given up on libertarianism because you don't think the non-aggression principle is axiomatic or grounded like through argumentation ethics. You think it's a value that to be weighed against other values. And so it kind of breaks down, your ability to claim it as it's no longer an axiom for you. It's no longer axiomatic. And so, well, the problem with steal a penny to save the world is, well, stealing requires aggression. Okay. But what does that mean? Well, that means a couple of things. In the classic, like Martians come and tell you to steal a penny to save the world. Well, the Martian is the aggressor, not me. So yeah, I'm taking the penny. There's nothing wrong with that. And the reason is because I've got a gun to my head that is the entire world. You know what I mean? Like, then the world is imbalanced. So we have to get rid of the aggressor first and foremost. Then we get to, okay, steal a penny because let's say now there's a meteorite coming down and there's a machine that's
Right.
like
It's an environmental problem that's creating the conflict, not a
right.
outside aggressor.
Which is why I think the would you steal your neighbor's ladder to save your mother from a burning building is a better analogy.
Yeah, dude, I tried, but and we can talk about the debate a little bit, but like it's really hard to when you have like with some debates it's easier to interject and stop people. It was much harder in that debate to do so, and I wanted to at several points stop them and say, "Guys, I don't like this reductio. Can we do the ladder and grandma one because I think that would just be less stupid.
You should have. You should have.
But I just could never get that in, and then they'd go off into other directions. But I think that one's much easier to talk about, and then it has more useful than like when you think about it, because it's like I think you said, because I caught part of your debate review, and it gets into like, well, is it like a ladder and like there's no one around to say don't take it? Is it a ladder with a do not take this sign? There's the Zulu, when I talked to him about this, then said like you could even imagine a scenario where like someone comes up to, like your neighbor comes up to you and says, hey, just to let you know, you can never, ever, ever use my ladder, even if you're trying to save
and
your
then like an
grandmother
hour
from a burning
later,
house. Your house catches on fire. Then you could be like, I think that
this guy's an
burned my house
arsonist.
down.
Yeah. So here's the thing. This is the thing too, is Michael Leibowitz came up with an analogy, which was, suppose you're driving in your car with your son, and then someone shoots up your car and you get into a car accident and like your son is, near fatally wounded. And then you come across a car, you steal that car to, take your son to the hospital. And that's another example of this, where it's like every single time we act without perfect knowledge of whether or not we're committing aggression. If I go to a privately owned mall, I assume that I can sit at the food court. I assume that I can touch the hand railing. I assume that I can use the elevator. But it may be aggressive. It may be, for whatever fucking reason, that there's some unknown rule that the property owner doesn't want me touching these things. But I just assume that like a mall is a place designed for me to go shopping and use the elevators and sit down. Like, it's the same situation here where like, if my grandmother's burning in a building, I assume my neighbor wants me to use their ladder to fucking save my grandma. Now, if my neighbor has said before, don't you dare use this ladder. Well, now we have another conversation. And it's like, well, why did they say that? Okay, they told me, they gave me beforehand knowledge. Maybe I ought to buy a ladder and I won't be in that position to begin with. But what's going on? Am I really shitty to this person? Is this a really shitty person? Are they burning down my grandma's house? There's a bunch of questions here. But I think the main thing here is that when you say it is right to explicitly steal something to steal something that you have explicit non-permission to use, what are you justifying? You are justifying that it is right, that it is morally good because of an emergency, in air quotes, to use other people's property against their will. And as soon as I need to know then, what is your limiting principle and how did you derive that limiting principle? Because if you don't give me that, then I must assume you're for U.S. aid. Like Dave Smith believes that it is 100% right for billions of dollars to be stolen from the American people because the Africans are in an emergency. They need their HIV medication. They need food. That's an emergency to them, right? Why is it okay to violate the rights of other humans in this presumed emergency, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to have a limiting principle. And
I agree.
I'll give the objectivists, at least they have a limiting principle, but I think it's a bad one, but at least they have one.
I think the answer that Dave gave, which you could say maybe, I think this is unsatisfactory for a lot of people, especially because like it was marketed as a debate, and so they were expecting Dave to have more of a like positive case to bring. But Dave's answer is
I
kind
feel
of
the
like
same way about Zulu. It's like, dude.
Well, we can do that, but like Dave's position was, I think there is a limiting principle, but I can't point to what that is. I like it's hard to say, and I think now.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Now
there's an intuition.
Right now,
there's an
I
intuition
understand
that it's wrong.
I
to
understand
watch your children be tortured to death.
This is why I
take
spent
a penny.
This is why I spent like the first 5-6 minutes framing the debate, because I was trying to say like I actually think they're both like pushing on things that like I'm sympathetic to both of them, because I'm sympathetic to what Dave's pointing to, but I think it's ill-defined, and I think Zulu's pointing to like this is ill-defined, and if you leave it ill-defined, this is like a really slippery slope into whim worship and just justifying anything based on. And I'm like, yeah, I think you're both right, and we need. I think we need. Now, maybe that debate wasn't we can say maybe point to the imperfections and say like we need better conversations going forward. But like I'm happy at least now that like I thought like we actually got to what the conversation needs to be, which is
Right.
like is it nap absolutism? And if we're saying it's not in these extenuating circumstances, then like how are we justifying that? Because I agree there needs to be a conversation about, and like maybe we don't have the answer yet, and maybe we won't have the answer for a while. But then it's like I feel like my frustration is that uh I wish that the Zulu camp was not as I don't know, unfriendly or uncharitable towards Dave for him admitting he doesn't know. But I do wish that the Dave camp, which I consider, I guess, kind of loosely part of the camp I'm in my audience, would not be as like uh what's the word, condescending towards like Zulu and his camp and like people like
Right.
you for kind
Right.
of saying like, all right, fine, like believe that, but we're not satisfied with that and we're going to keep pushing to try to find that philosophical consistency. I think that like we need, but like we need, this is how philosophy works, is like people talk
Mhm.
these things out and like keep brainstorming and trying to like uh check their premises and come up with more creative solutions to the problems that we face in philosophy. And so like there's parts of that debate that like I'm going to do a postmortem on it on my show when we're done here. There's parts of that debate like I feel like I could have done better, that like I wish would have gone differently, but I'm at least happy that like it got the ball rolling in terms of
Yeah.
like people
I think it's
talking rather than just like everyone just like sniping at each other on X for the last 2 years.
I think it's a victory for Liquid Zulu and our camp to just even force the conversation, because I think for a long time this wasn't being had in the libertarian space. Whether or not you think Zulu did well, which I think Zulu definitely could have done better. No offense, Zulu, I love you, but but also it was 1 o'clock in the morning when he started. I think it wasn't not necessarily a game time, but I get it. Um, yeah, I think when you come to these limit cases, there's a moral intuition that like something breaks. And I absolutely um respect Dave's position in the sense of like my moral intuition says steal a penny or watch my child be tortured to death. Like something feels wrong in my heart that I would watch my child be tortured to death and not take a fucking penny. Right? Like I totally get that. And the thing is though, is this is the difference between a libertarian and a post-libertarian. Is a libertarian says, okay, I have a moral intuition that this isn't quite right. Now I need to go into the theory and figure out why. Why do I have cognitive dissonance where I feel in my heart that something's not right, but the theory is telling me to do something that feels wrong? And then the post libertarians, such as Dave, that just goes, okay, well, you're goofy. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you're silly if you think that's right. It's like, no, this is an opportunity to dig deeper into those limit cases to discover what's going on here. And that's when you do the work to go, okay, well, what does steal mean? Okay, what does this actually look like? And that's where we talk about, you know,
Yeah.
is it right? Like, why have I been given non? Like, if I look at that car case, for example, right, instead of the ladder case, it's like there's a car. Okay, I'm going to take the car, and it's not stealing as far as I'm concerned because I assume that someone would let me use their car to save my child's life. But now let's change it, and there's a window in the window of the car is a sign that says, "Do not take this car under unless authorized personnel." Right now, I have express non-consent to use the car, and it's like, okay, I have to choose between taking the car and saving my child's life or letting my child die. And it's like, well, why is that? Why is there? Would someone put that sign in a car that expressly gives non-consent? Well, maybe they have a child themselves with a medical condition that requires frequent stops to the hospital. Maybe you're killing someone else's child so that you can save your child. Is it right to murder to save your kid? And then the question becomes, well, how many people can you murder to save your kid? Like
There's
there's a
also this
reason, like
knowledge
stealing.
problem of like
Yeah.
like, and I think you've consent like people can make mistakes, but there is that issue where like we never have all the information whenever we act,
What's
and so
mens
like
rea versus
right.
actus reus, right?
So
Like they don't
so
have the mens rea to steal.
so it can get very complicated, and I think I guess I'll end on I'll say this will be my last word. Then I want to give you kind of the last word and a chance to just kind of closing thoughts and plug your show before we hop out. But
Yeah.
I guess my frustration is that like I don't think Dave has to be the philosopher king. Like
Mhm.
I think Dave can say, you know, I understand legal theory enough to like, go on these big shows and present it to laymen, and now maybe we can be unsatisfied with his immigration policy, but we've talked about that already. But still be like he's doing a lot of good, and if he's saying, hey, this stuff here, I don't know if we have solved, then like I feel like the actual philosophers then and the jurists, they just need to keep working until they come up with answers that then
Mhm.
the rest of the libertarian laymen and pundits and whatnot then go, oh look, we solved that problem, right? But and maybe like and to be clear, I guess I'm in the camp of thinking I don't know that like Zulu and you and all of them have like perfectly solved the problem,
Mhm.
because I think we're still like talking about it, uh, but I think like we're laying like I think you guys are on the right track. I think you're moving in the direction of trying to solve the problem. And I think someone like Dave, like if you like a year from now, like, write something or make like an hour video or something that like perfectly explains it and we all agree with it, then like, we're all better for it. But I guess anyway, that's just my thought. And listen, I know, like, because I've had so many conversations on this. I knew everyone's like, but Dave drew first blood, and he called us worse than communists. And like I've told
Yeah,
Dave
yeah.
that. I'm like, listen, man, like, what's worse than a commie? Like, that's one of the worst things you can say to libertarians. Like, you're worse than a commie, and I get it. Like, that does sting a little bit. Um, but it's like, like if Liquid Zulu lived here in America, it's like we would all be putting the box cars together, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like I think we need to find ways to like, and I think again this applies to everyone. I'm not saying like just you guys.
Yeah.
My first video responding to Zulu's video, I was kind of saying to Dave and to the Mises Caucus and to Zulu and to like the people like you and your crowd is just like I think we should have these disagreements. I think we should talk these things out. We don't all have to be friends, even. I'm not even saying that, but like, I, I am just not of the type to like make any of you guys my enemy. To make like, I'm certainly not going to make Dave Smith my enemy, but I'm also not going to make Liquid Zulu or you my enemy. It's just kind of like, why would I do that? Like, even where we disagree on things, it's just like we're a hell of a lot closer to each other. And you can say things like, well, you cease to be a libertarian when you say this. And I'm like, okay, like we could debate that, but also like we're all still part of the same movement. If you even if you want to say some people are at times departing from the theory. So anyway, that's my closing thought.
I Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the show. I know I can be a bit ornery today, especially because I'm just kind of sick. So my brain is working at like 80% capacity, if that. Um, yeah, I mean, like, I don't want to turn this into the I hate Dave Smith show or anything. I have issues with Dave Smith. And like 99% of my issues with people like Dave Smith really just comes from one problem, which is libertarianism as a philosophy needs to be gatekept. And when Dave Smith or people like him preach that the non-aggression principle is a value that can be abandoned under certain circumstances, then he creates a poisoning of the well of what is libertarianism. And because of people like him, anytime I go somewhere and try and explain what libertarianism is, I have an uphill battle to fight against the poor philosophy that he has injected into the culture. And it actively works against libertarianism when he preaches those things. If he says, I'm a post libertarian, I used to be a libertarian, I have some disagreements, or like I'm a paleocon, or like, I'm a conservative with some libertarian leanings, like that's fine. And I agree with you. I think he's doing a lot of great things in the terms of like going places and introducing people to authors and things like that. But I also think he's doing a lot of bad for the libertarian movement because he's preaching a philosophy that is anti-libertarian. And now all of these other people are associating an anti-libertarian philosophy with libertarianism, which creates an uphill battle for us to be able to explain what libertarianism is and how libertarianism has solutions for problems and things of that nature. And I think, you know, I don't know to what degree, I think Dave Smith is somewhat unique in this compared to a lot of other connected libertarian podcasting, individuals. But there's a lot of gatekeeping at the top, a lot of crabs in the bucket mentality, like someone like Clint Russell, for example, right? I went on his show. He tried to ambush me. It didn't work out well. And then all of a sudden I'm blocked and and there's, and I can't get any contact with him because oh, we can't do that. There's people like Redheaded Libertarian, which are just conservative constitutional Republican claiming the name of libertarianism. I had inroads with other people oh God, what's his name? When the Tom Woods stuff came out, and it's very obvious that he, had an inappropriate relationship with his first wife when she was 15 years old. But because that came from the Prags, anybody that was honest about that, had to be shut down and gate kept. And so, there's a feeling beyond just the poisoning of the well of libertarian philosophy that there are a lot of people that are conservatives first, Christian conservatives maybe first, libertarians second, that are preaching things that go against libertarianism, and then they're gatekeeping based off of clout and based off of the ability to get on large shows and things like that, because they feel it's their desire to package their version of libertarianism and kind of keep the less popular Zulu people locked away to a certain degree. And I'll be honest, yeah, there breeds some resentment to that. Like when Dave Smith was like, oh, I'll bring on Michael Heiss and I'll tell him, don't talk about libertarian infighting and things like that. It's like there's this culture, cultivated libertarian messaging towards the right wing in this strategy, in this paleo libertarian strategy, that is not necessarily preaching libertarianism, and I liked the Mises Caucus originally, but again, Michael Heiss and Angela McArdle, they've been accused of some pretty bad things. I want to see if there's actually any truth to that. I want to see that go through the courts, to see if there was any money laundering or if it's just a bunch of brags, barking up the wrong tree, trying to, attack people because of typical libertarian infighting. But, Joshua Smith was a great candidate, and Mises Caucus put forward someone that was, doing DARPA research and was the most charismatic person ever.
I supported,
it was, a group.
I supported Josh Smith, just for the record.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And so it's just I think there's more than just, what I mean to say is I think the Zulu camp of people, of which I am in, I'm not a follower, quote unquote, of Zulu. I just think we have very similar philosophies and we talk a lot. I think there's two areas of breakdown. And I think one is so drama filled, people don't want to talk about it, but fuck it, I'm here, I'll talk about it. And that is there's a bit of a resentment that this strategy that we find to be pragmatism, is also being used to cultivate a message toward all the big podcasts and all the big conversations to try and gatekeep out the people that are actually fighting for libertarian philosophy because they're seen as problematic because, oh, we're autistic, or oh, we're too into the theory. So we got to keep them down.
I think that was not put towards you guys. That was put towards we're not going to talk about the the prags and the libertarians who were pushing a lot of the more social degenerate and
I agree.
other things.
I agree.
Yeah,
the Chase Oliver types that think that drag queen story hour is somehow a good fucking thing or some shit like that. I agree. But I just mean in general, it has been a process that we have seen where there is a gatekeeping nature towards
I agree.
the clout
I think
of these individuals that honestly all of the attention is on, and they're preaching something that we find to be anti-libertarian, claiming the moniker of libertarianism, while at the same time saying, well, yeah, you can violate the non-aggression principles
My
sometimes, and we
my
need closed
message,
borders and things
yeah,
like
so,
that.
like, my message to, like, you guys was to, like,
Hmm.
try to be less resentful and to not be as, like, to yeah, like, maybe be upset about what the things that Dave said 2 years ago, but to, like, I don't know, not, uh I don't know the right way to say this, but, like, I don't know, just not be
Stop being a
overly
dick.
defensive,
I'm a bit of a
like,
dick sometimes. I get it, you know?
whatever, yeah, but then, like, my message to, like, Dave is the same thing that I've said to, like, the Mises Caucus for a while, which is, like, listen, I get there are some people you have to block because they're, like, super annoying, but,
Yeah.
like, you guys went, I think, too far in the other direction with that, where you just, like, anytime anyone would express any disagreement, or criticism, they were kind of blocked off and ignored and whatnot. And
Hmm.
I've always been more of the like, I think we should platform these conversations and people, and uh, and to, like, Dave to be like, "Dave, I think you are a good champion of the movement, but I think if you wanna be the champion of our movement, then, like, I think it would help you and the movement if you
Hmm.
not all the time, not with every person, but at least sometimes, like, check in with, like, the more radical
The
base
jurists. Yeah.
and be like, "Hey, what do you," like, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but just get their input. Be like, "What do you think I'm getting right? What do you think I'm getting wrong?" Like, what I think that kinda healthy dialogue is necessary for the movement to continue to flourish and grow, because I think we
To Dave's
need.
credit, he doesn't block people on Twitter. A lot of other people do. Like Dave does engage, and I think
He
he does a
blocked
lot of
Monhawk, but
attacking.
then he unblocked him, so
Right, but I'm just saying, like to Dave's credit, amongst a lot of the top tier people that like gatekeep people under, Dave is less of an active gatekeeper than those people are. I don't see Dave. I've never heard of anybody saying, "Oh, this person told people not to invite me and to keep me off of their shows." I hear that a lot about a lot of people up in the upper echelons, right? I like Eric July does that shit. Clint Russell does that shit. Red Libertarian does that shit. But Dave Smith, I've never heard from anybody being like, "Oh, he told me not." Maybe he pulled the ladder up a little bit. Whatever, that's fine. It's not his job to get small YouTubers on shows. But I will give Dave that credit, which is like he will engage if he feels like it's big enough. I just
Yeah.
I do agree that that would be better for all of us to have more conversations like this. I think it fundamentally comes down to what is the strategy. And, Dave Smith's strategy, as far as I can tell, and people like him, is reach as many people as possible and get them, interested in the idea of libertarianism and maybe reading some libertarian theory. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad strategy. Liquid Zulu and I, we have a strategy, in the Libertarian video, which is to speak to the remnant,
Isaiah's
right? To
job, yeah.
speak, yeah, it's to speak to the people that can become philosophically consistent libertarians. I'm kind of in between Zulu and Dave, right? It's like I recognize sometimes the message needs to be spoken in a means that like speaks to normal people, right? And things like that. The only thing I would say is as much as it's important for the big libertarians to maybe gatekeep the crazies out so libertarians don't look so crazy, it's important for us crazies to gatekeep those big noises, those big voices, and say, look, you don't have to be a philosopher king, but you can't say it's right to violate the NAP, right? Like you can't talk about the will of the people as an argument for your stance, right? You can't say certain things that are just antithetical to libertarian theory, like and also call yourself a libertarian. It does a disservice to the movement. And I do think a dialogue between those two camps is something that is, I think, maybe continuing to grow and is like a really good thing for both sides because like look, man, I have a lot of problems with Dave Smith, but like I, I'm not I don't think we're all better off if every one of those big voices stops talking.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like, I don't agree with everything you said there, but I think like the essence and like the core of what you're saying, I 100% agree with. So we have a lot more we could talk about, and I actually I forgot you've done some videos talking about like the some of like the culture war stuff and like the trans stuff from a libertarian perspective. So I'd like to get you back
Yeah.
on at some point to talk about that, because I think
Yeah,
that'd be
I'd love to
a
talk
good
about some of that
good
stuff.
conversation. Where can people from my audience, I guess, just search Fabian Liberty? Is there any other things you want to plug or whatnot before you
Yeah, just
go?
Fabian Liberty. You'll find my YouTube and my Twitter, both Fabian Liberty.
Yep.
Sorry I wasn't 100% here. I'm like all
No, you're
stuffed
good.
up.
You're good. You're good. No, it was a good
You know what I mean?
conversation.
But I was like, no, the show must go on. I'm gonna dope myself up on some BC powder and Dayquil and just fucking go for it. But yeah. You can find me Fabian Liberty. I am an anarcho objectivist. I won't be like Liquid Zulu and say I'm the true objectivist. I'm not. I have a little bit more humility than that. But and I do debates fairly often. I do reaction videos and things like that. My streams are usually a little bit longer. I guess maybe because I came from like the Twitch space initially. So you know, come in, have a good time, join the Discord. Unlike Zulu, mine's open whenever you want. So just come in and hop in and talk shit. And if you're too crazy, I'll block you. I appreciate it so much. And then also, please pimp out all your stuff because I know you're working for institutes and stuff like that. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, follow me at Biblical Anarchy, and we're I work for the Libertarian Christian Institute. If you're so inclined, if you want to support what we're doing, we are doing our end of the year fundraiser. So every dollar you donate in the month of December is matched dollar for dollar, and you can go to libertarianchristians.com/donate if you want to do that. But yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll do it again sometime. I'm now a little, I'm not mad at you. I'm like 20 minutes late for my next stream, and I'm gonna go hop over there quick. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, have a good one.
you too,
Brother,
man.
and it's always a good sign when you run late. It means the conversation was interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That was a lot of fun. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks again, Fabian, and talk to y'all later.
See ya.